Welcome to Art Appreciation in The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. Video games are perhaps the purest form of art because they're handcrafted worlds for us to explore. Sit back, relax, and let me take you on a tour through some of my favorite places in Hyrule. Here we are in Kakariko Village, which is my favorite area in the whole game. I just love the way that this town looks. It's really nice and cozy, and it's surrounded by mountains. There's a real charm to this kind of homey place with a giant windmill looking over it. And of course, you gotta love the rooftops that you can hookshot to, and the funny little characters that are all around this place. There's some really beautiful art going on here with the architecture and all of the things drawn onto the side of the buildings with the woodworking. I love these little posters. They're kind of hard to see, but if you really zoom in, you can see this one looks like it has a little dancing Goron on it. And if we come over here, there's some with the soldiers, kind of looking like tough guys. And then if we head this way, more towards the windmill, you can see the picture of the windmill keeper and his little music box and some potions. Here's the carpenters with very square looking faces and maybe some news articles and royal postings. Of course, we got our little cuckoos everywhere that you gotta gather up. And I like how there's just moss growing on this one roof. Got the lady who wants us to get her cuckoos and the tiny hole in the wall that we can get to if we fly from the windmill over here on a chicken. We can get inside of the house. And of course, there's the well that becomes pretty important later on in the game when you come back as a child. It's a shame that you don't get to spend very much time in the Granny's potion shop in the game. It's kind of a later game area that you discover once you start doing the big Goron sword quest, but it's really beautiful. It's cool how there's these gemstones hanging from the ceiling on these strings, and even these strange, almost sea anemone looking disco balls. Not to mention the kind of the rippling potions of all these different colors around here. We can also see that she has a little, I don't even know what to call this, a thing where you grind things to powder, and some subtle little pictures back here. She has her broomstick right here because she's a witch. And of course, my very favorite, the little baby tiger is so cute and she pets it. She's one of the more stylized characters in the game. Most characters look somewhat realistic, but her entire head is just one big elongated thing, and she has very sharp features with her nose and her ears and her hair. Behind her curtain, we can even see she's got some clothes back here. They're just 2D planes with textures on them. And she's got plenty of shelves and some little jars. I really love this Japanese looking scroll that is right here. And then we see some other little goodies. I love the mushroom skewers that are just coming out of this plant pot for some reason. And there seems to be a lot of cages up on the ceiling, maybe where she keeps birds or some other type of animal. But yeah, it's a very mysterious looking place, and I just wish we got to see more of it in the game. She has some spell books, but you also can't really tell what it says in them because it's a bit blurry, but definitely one of the cooler looking places in the game. Here we are in Impa's house, and there's a lot of little Easter eggs in this place that you probably didn't notice. At least you didn't notice all of them because it's really hard to see on a 3DS screen. But first, one thing that's really neat is there's this little dagger that's stabbed into the map of Hyrule, and it's actually three-dimensional if you are able to look at it from this view. So that's kind of cool. And then over here, there's a lot of things that are teaching the player what to do. In this case, we see that you can shoot an arrow through fire to trigger one of those little eye statues. And then if you come over to these ones, It shows you, in some cases, you've got to like collect a rupee to open a gate, or you can catch a fairy in a bottle, use the hover boots to get across an area, and then we see some pictures of the Megaton hammer being used to hit a button or to crush a boulder. And then over here, we see some pictures of the Ocarina of Time, and using the Song of Time to get rid of those big blocks, and pushing one of those enemy statues. Behind here, we can even see a little hint of using a fish to make Jabu Jabu swallow you. Here's some hints that show about using a bottle to catch some blue fire. There's one that shows that you can hit the uvula things inside of Jabu Jabu. There's one that's teaching you how to get to the forest temple if you hook shot that little branch. But this last one, I'm not actually sure what this is. Oh, I know what it is. It's showing you can throw a bomb into that rotating giant pot in the middle of Goron City. It took me a second to figure that out. But yeah, a lot of these things are just hard to see in the game, and it's cool how detailed they actually are. And then over here we can see an image that's showing off the use of the mirror shield to reflect the sunlight at those sun icons. And there's some other papers here too, but it's hard to see what they say. There's so many cool little objects that are modeled in this place. I love the shields and the sword and dagger. If we come back, we can see all of these little things on the kitchen table here. And it's cool to think that, you know, video games don't just happen from someone hitting the generate AI button. These things are painstakingly created by people that handcraft each model and texture. This table is cool because it's got a Sheikah book, which of course Impa would have. And then we can see that there's some diningware here. The plates look really realistic, especially for a 3DS game. Like, those plates look like they could be from a modern game with the amount of reflectivity and how detailed the texture is. And we've got a little candle, of course, and some tiny little treasure boxes. There's also another little treasure chest I saw up here. And it's just cool to see all the different books and the bottles and vials that are in here. Impa's got some cool vases, some pots, and the fireplace, while there's no actual fire, the illusion comes from this animated texture that kind of gives off this glowing sensation. And I think it's really cool because it changes the whole lighting of the room when you look at it. Let's see what we can find here at the bottom of the well, one of the scariest places in the game. And obviously it's not quite as scary as the original N64 version where there was like blood on the walls and stuff. But it's still pretty creepy. We've got a lot of skeletons, a lot of these skulls and their faces. If we come through here, we can see a really creepy painting of this creature with his hands under his mouth. Kind of looks like some kind of crazy demon, or like the cat from Alice in Wonderland. Despite how much I hate these enemies to fight in the game, these hands are actually really cool. If you look at the color scheme of them, you see how like it has the really bright green highlights, but then towards the bottom it's got a darker purple tone and reds. At the top where the hand is cut off, there's this really interesting blue mesh looking color. We've got all these chains everywhere in prison cells. It's a really scary place. And back here is one of the few places where we can find these mummy enemies, who also have really cool lighting on them with some purple and green contrast. And they're in these sarcophaguses that are scattered around. And also, these bird statues with long horns are really weird, really interesting to look at. We don't really learn much about them in the game, but I'm always fascinated by statues in these kind of games and what they really represent. Here's the pit that you can fall into from multiple locations where there's these creepy hands that want to grab you inside of this pool of acidy muck type stuff. If you look from this angle, you can tell these hands are super low poly, so they wouldn't be that scary, but for some reason they just are. And you just avoid them at all costs whenever you get down here. And also I love these little pegs that have the skulls in them. The atmosphere of this place is just really impressive, with that kind of feeling of dread that everything gives you inside of here. Probably the most interesting piece of art in this entire place is a statue of this smiling creature that you can find towards the back of the well. It seems like it's smiling and kind of laughing devilishly with its little hands sticking out. It's hard to tell exactly what it is or what it's supposed to be, but this is another thing I would love to see return in a future Zelda game as like an important character or some kind of enemy. And while making this video, I actually made a really interesting connection. I was looking at this guy and it actually reminded me of something else I looked at later on in the video. We're gonna go to the Shadow Temple really quick and tell me if this guy reminds you of what I'm about to show you. This is another creature that is in a very similar pose and similar look to that thing that we saw in the well. This one seems almost more frog-like, with a long tongue that sticks out, but at least to me, the pose seems very similar, with the hands sticking out and the face kind of looking directly at you. Let me know in the comments if you guys think that this is the same creature or if it's just different entirely. This one does seem to be more angry than the other one, with some narrow eyes, and it doesn't really have a smile or a grimace like the other one does. Just for comparison, let's take a look at them side by side. If we come into this room where we have these Grim Reaper looking guys that spin around and hit you with the giant swords, or the big scythes, we can look at their faces, which is usually hard to see in the game, but they've got very creepy purple eyes and skull faces. I really love the look of them. And the whole atmosphere of the Shadow Temple is really interesting. I love the imagery that's going on here with the chains and the scythes and the Grim Reaper type characters, along with the spiders that are just crawling around on all the walls, and the catacomb looking textures with the skulls and the bones that are coming out of the dirt. And if we come over here, we can see these fan looking things that blow at you. They almost look like goblins to me, with big pointy ears. Okay, tell me, does this room not remind you of that part in The Incredibles where Mr. Incredible is like running through here and he gets shot by all those sticky balls that eventually he gets captured by Syndrome? And then over here, of course, we've got some really creepy imagery with these guillotines that will fall on you, and these really scary looking creatures that are on here. I guess they're mice with giant eyes, but they're looking down at you. But if we come over here and look at some more of these guillotines, in these, the mice are just, they're not looking towards the player, they're looking down at the guillotines. And again, it's really hard to see these guys when you're playing in the game, but there's a lot of detail put into them. Maybe these mice or rats are symbolic of the Black Death, the plague that killed millions of people in the Middle Ages. We know the plague was spread through fleas carried by rats. And over here, there's even a big giant one of those rats grabbing at this chain. The Shadow Temple is my favorite dungeon in the game, and I love the design of this boat. We've got the giant skeleton wearing a crimson red robe, and he's holding these rings, and he's got these other rings on his arms, these bracelets. It's kind of like the ferry to the underworld. And of course, in the game, you'll ride on the boat through this really creepy cave. We can see these ghostly figures that are wisping around. It's a really cool effect seeing these. And over here, there's a really cool statue. It almost looks like an Egyptian, like Anubis, but another one of these bird-type creatures. Maybe we'll see this guy show up as an evil version of the Rito in a future game or something. But I really would love to see Nintendo bring back some of these subtle references to games like Ocarina of Time and turn maybe like some of these enemy statues or weapons you can see on the walls of buildings and put them into like a new game, but they're actually interactable and usable and things like that. Now, it would be a major mistake if I didn't talk about how gorgeous the water in this game looks. You wouldn't think a 3DS game would be able to have such detailed looking water like this, but there's a lot of magic going on, I think, with these scrolling textures that give the illusion of light shimmering and reflecting on the water surface. Even this little waterfall looks really nice, in this just kind of whole pool of water area. And then if we come over this way, we can look at the big waterfall. There's just so many layers and depth to the water. You can see kind of almost the white water look towards the place where it crashes down. And then when we come up here, there's just a lot of really cool deep looking greens and blues to the water texture itself. I watched a video recently on how Nintendo are just the masters of using scrolling textures and displacement maps to give the illusion of detailed water, and it's really true. They're just so good at making this really, really detailed. Gerudo Fortress has always kind of reminded me of Mesa Verde, that city that's built into the side of a mountain by the Pueblo people. I think there's a lot of resemblances between those two locations, and I've always loved this place. It looks so cool. It's so interesting to explore because when you go on the inside, you never know which of these exits you're going to come out of. And from an architectural point of view, it's just very, very fascinating to look at. Again, it has a really beautiful vine texture here. This one has much more leaves than the other ones, and it's kind of more of a dead leaf look than the other vines that we've seen that are climbable. It's a cool place because you can tell, rather than the building being built outside of an environment, it's very much, everything is built with the environment in mind. It's kind of built out the side of things. Even the walls that just kind of merge right into a giant rocky mountain. And it's meant to be kind of an intimidating place because the Gerudo are really strong women, and they kind of just throw anyone in prison that dares to come to their village. And even these little shrubs and bushes are very unique to the area. This place has some really cool mounted skulls on the walls, and they even have these beaded necklaces that go around them. This one's got some really curly horns and wings on the side of it. There's some really neat details here with their wooden posts that have arrows shot into them. They got some really cool wavy looking patterns. Even the outfits of the Gerudo are really unique. They've got this Arab look to them with the baggy pants and the pointy shoes, and they've got the face coverings to keep the dust and the sand out. This room's really fun with the lava cauldron, and they have just these little stumps that they use for chairs around the table. There's some really beautiful art in the training ground area as well. We've got these pillars with these really cool patterns and symbols on them, and then we have these awesome archways with these lion heads. Again, this is another interesting thing. We never see lions in the Zelda universe, but they must exist because we've got these really detailed sculptures of them. And then if we come over here to this lava area, there's something really interesting with this statue. It's like this giant cyclops looking face, but it's almost reminiscent of Master Koga in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. What do you guys think about this? Does it look somewhat like Master Koga to you? The statue obviously has the face on all sides of it, but it's really interesting. There's nothing else that really looks like this in Ocarina of Time. And I also love how, because of the lava, it kind of shimmers on the walls. We can kind of see the reflectivity on these spiral symbols. Here we are outside of the Spirit Temple, and this is one of the only locations in the game that I know of that you can find these palm trees. And I think the leaves on these are really, really pretty. You can tell they're just slapped onto a really simple piece of geometry, but the details of the fronds themselves make them look really nice, especially when you look at them from a distance. And I love kind of the layers to the sand. You can see all of like the ridges to the textures. And then coming over this way, we see the area where it's usually the oasis once you play the Song of Storms. And the temple itself is really, really beautiful looking. We've got the big statue of this woman, and you might not notice very often in the game because you're just playing through it, but there's actually this big snake that wraps all the way around her. It's this cobra, and I think the cobra headdress and how it goes all the way around her is really, really cool to look at. And it seems like she has this kind of face paint as well that you usually wouldn't notice playing through, but definitely a really, really cool looking area of the game. That's all we have time for today, unfortunately, but I'd love to make a part 2 of this. Maybe I could explore art in Hyrule Castle, Zora's Domain, and Lake Hylia. Let me know what areas you guys would like to see, and if there's any other games that you think have great art that we could appreciate together. You can subscribe if you don't want to miss out on the future videos, and I'll see you guys next time.